Hello, Gino here, and you are listening to Otherworld Connections. We live in a critical time where now, more than ever, angels and fairies, hidden forces, are bursting at the seams of the veil to work with us. They want to see us change in order to save the world and live in service to others. So join me on a journey to empowerment and enlightenment with an angelic angle and a fairy focus, looking into ways to improve our current situation, morality, archetypes, solutions for self-healing, and spiritual sciences in light of theosophy and other occult traditions. Hello, welcome back to Otherworld Connections. I'm your host, Gino, and you can download, watch, listen to this episode. Well, watch is a bit rich because I tag some video on top of it. You can listen to this episode and past episodes on all podcast platforms. You can do the same on YouTube, on my Substack, otherworldconnections.substack.com, and my website, thesecretkindergarten.com, which is all about solutions through being kind and caring, and through doing that and spending time in service to others, you come across the principles and the rules and the laws of the universe. And you learn that things like sticking up for yourself and for others and defending yourself and others is important because there is a right and a wrong. Okay, so that's what it's all about. But in this show, we're talking about the olive tree. Why are we talking about the olive tree? Well, in a way we'll find out. But it's a gateway to these connections with the other world. These intuitive senses, these actions based on what the right thing and the wrong thing to do in your life is. The trees really, really want to help. I did a reading for somebody yesterday, and it was a little bit, I thought, embarrassing because it was just sort of, trees is the message. And I don't know how that spoke to that lady, but it did. So she's off getting amongst the trees. And that was super important for her, and it made a lot of sense, more than it did to me. And the trees do speak to us, and that's why they keep popping up on the Otherworld Connections. There's a connection between the trees and the angelic realm and the fairy realm, for lack of better terms, but we need to put names to these things. Otherwise, we just do podcasts that are even more blah, blah, blah than this. Let me just mention about the olive tree from this book, The Angel Tree, The Enchanting Quest for the World's Oldest Olive Tree. This little mini review here, despite the title, Dingwall-Main, that's Alex Dingwall-Main, the author, doesn't necessarily need to find the oldest tree, but at a minimum he must procure one that is ancient enough, say 1,000 to 1,500 years old. Olives can live extraordinary long lives, and pretty enough to satisfy his wealthy client, Monsieur Latour. Dingwall-Main finds several promising subjects, including the angel tree of the title. Frustratingly, though, the locals sometimes can't be moved to part with the most revered trees for a mere monetary reward. The angel tree does illuminate one fascinating aspect of life in southern Europe. Old olive trees are considered a must-have accessory for the gardens of the rich. This is a boon to farmers who can sell past their prime trees for top dollar. I think it's surprising that the locals can't be moved to part with trees for monetary reward. Does say sometimes. How often that is? I thought all the time they'd be wanting to sell them. money being the religion that's out there, the dominant religion. So, with olive trees as the focus, to help us figure out what we do, what is better to do, how to heal, how to change, how to achieve goals and live successful lives of service by making these Otherworld connections. This is me, Gino from Otherworld Connections. Thank you for tuning into Revolution Radio, #1 listener-supported radio station in the whole world. So please help support our efforts and airtime by visiting the station's donation section on our website, revolution.radio. From The Story of Trees and How They Changed the Way We Live by Kevin Hobbs and David West, let's read about the olive, Athena's gift. The olive tree, its fruit, and the oil that is distilled from it are considered quintessentially Mediterranean. Cultivated since prehistoric times, the olive was first used by humans at least 20,000 years ago. Over the centuries, many Mediterranean countries built their wealth on trading in olives. An archaeological site on the southwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee revealed olive stones and wood fragments left behind by Upper Paleolithic hunter-gatherers. Pottery vessels found nearby provided early evidence that olive oil was traded some 8,000 years ago. That's a long time. That's a long time ago. Exactly when olive farming began is much contested. But written evidence from 2400 BC has been found on Syrian clay tablets. A fire that destroyed the city of Ebla on the outskirts of Aleppo baked the clay tablets, preserving the writing. Most dealt with commercial affairs, and the tablets revealed that the value of olive oil was put at 5 times that of wine. It's probably about 3 times the price now. In modern Palestine, ownership of an olive tree is much treasured. Over the centuries, single trees were bequeathed to more than one descendant, and the division of the tree has continued so that now each branch of the tree is owned by a different member of the family. The ability of the tough, wrinkled olive tree to thrive in poor, dry soil allowed it to spread across the Mediterranean and beyond. In Greek mythology, it is said that the goddess Athena, daughter of the supreme god Zeus, gave the olive tree to the Athenians. The tree is believed to have appeared next to the well of the Athenian Acropolis, becoming the source of all future trees. A wreath of olive leaves found in the 3,300-year-old sarcophagus of the Egyptian king Tutankhamun is now preserved in the herbarium of the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew, which is in London. The olive branch is still seen as a symbol of peace. In the Bible, it denotes light, peace, and divine blessing. References to olives and olive trees are found throughout the Quran, and Muslim prayer beads are made of olive wood. When defeated in battle, Greeks and Romans held up olive branches as a symbol of surrender. I'm now going to read. I better hurry up. Okay, because this is by Aldous Huxley, and it's so interesting, I'm going to read the whole thing, okay? It's going to take us close to the top of the hour, okay, guys? So this is called The Olive Tree, from The Olive Tree and Other Essays by Aldous Huxley. And the way he writes it is the way other writers of his time and a bit earlier would view things as, occultists / spiritual scientists, and because of that, it's very much worth listening to, and it is interesting. So here we go. The olive tree, the tree of life. Now here's the thing, I don't know if it is the Bodhi tree and Yggdrasil and the burning bush, but it must be because it says here, okay? The Bodhi tree, Yggdrasil and the burning bush, populus, Ausidae, gratissima, vitis Iaco, formose, myrtus, veneri, sua, laurea, Phoebo. I don't know if that was just some curse. Oh, anyway. Everywhere and before the world was finally laicized, at all times, trees have been worshipped. It is not to be wondered at. The tree is an intrinsically numinous being, solidified. A great fountain of life rises in the trunk, spreads in the branches, scatters in a spray of leaves and flowers and fruits. With a slow, silent ferocity, the roots go burrowing down into the earth. Tender, yet irresistible. Life battles with the unliving stones and has the mastery. Half hidden in the darkness, half displayed in the air of heaven, the tree stands there, magnificent, a manifest God. Even today we feel its majesty and beauty. Feel in certain circumstances its rather fearful quality of otherness, strangeness, hostility. Trees in the mass can be almost terrible. There are devils in the great pine woods of the north, in the swarming equatorial jungle. Alone in a forest one sometimes becomes aware of the silence, the thick, clotted, living silence of the trees. One realizes one's isolation in the midst of a vast concourse of alien presences. Herne the Hunter was something more than the ghost of a Windsor gamekeeper. He was probably a survival of Jupiter Cernunnos, a lineal descendant of the Cretan Zeus, a wood god who in some of his aspects was frightening and even malignant. He blasts the tree and takes the cattle and makes milk kine yield blood, and shakes a chain in a most hideous and dreadful manner. Even in a royal forest and only 20 miles from London, the serried trees can inspire terror. Alone or in small groups, trees are benignly numinous. The alienness of the forest is so much attenuated in the park or the orchard that it changes its emotional sign and from oppressively sinister becomes delightful. Tamed and isolated, those leaping fountains of non-human life bring only refreshment to spirits parched by the dusty commerce of the world. Poetry is full of groves and shrubberies. One thinks of Milton, landscape gardening in Eden, of Pope at Twickenham. One remembers Coleridge's sycamore and Marvell's green thought in a green shade. Chaucer's love of trees was so great that he had to compile a whole catalogue in order to express it. I like them all, but especially the olive, for what it symbolizes. First of all, peace. With its leaves and joy, with its golden oil. True, the crown of olive was originally worn by Roman conquerors at Ovation. The peace it proclaimed was the peace of victory, the peace which is too often only the tranquility of exhaustion or complete annihilation. Rome and its customs have passed, and we remember of the olive only the fact that it stood for peace, not the circumstances in which it did so. And I just want to step out of that and say, I lived in Manurewa, South Auckland for 5 years, and maybe you don't know, I don't know if you know about New Zealand, but that is the ghetto. That is the ghetto. That is where like people were terrified of even going there, right? The street I lived on was lined with olive trees. Never an altercation on that street. Never one. Okay, granted there were murders in the park just nearby, but in that spot there were no olive trees. I'm just saying. Does the council know of the peaceful symbolism of the trees? helps prevent the violence, because they played classical music down at the train station to stop everybody from killing each other. Anyway, we are a long way from the imperator riding in triumph through the streets of Rome. The association of olive leaves with peace is like the association of the number 7 with good luck, or the colour green with hope. It is an arbitrary and, so to say, metaphysical association. That is why it has survived in the popular imagination down to the present day. Even in countries where the olive tree does not grow, men understand what is meant by the olive branch, and can recognize in a political cartoon its pointed leaves. The association, I forgot to say, this is from 1913, I believe, this book. The association of olive oil with joy had a pragmatic reason. Applied externally, oil was supposed to have medicinal properties. In the ancient world, those who could afford it were in the habit of oiling themselves at every opportunity. A shiny and well-lubricated face was thought to be beautiful. It was also a sign of prosperity. To the ancient Mediterranean peoples, the association of oil with joy seemed inevitable and obvious. Our habits are not those of the Romans, Greeks, and Hebrews. What to them was natural is today hardly even imaginable. Patterns of behavior change, and ideas which are associated in virtue of the pattern existing at a given moment of history will cease to be associated when that pattern exists no more. But ideas which are associated arbitrarily in virtue of some principle or some absence of principle unconnected with current behavior patterns will remain associated through changing circumstances. One must be something of an archaeologist to remember the old and once thoroughly reasonable association between olive oil and joy. The equally old, but quite unreasonable and arbitrary association between olive leaves and peace has survived intact into the machine age. It is surprising, I often think, that our Protestant bibliolaters should have paid so little attention to the oil which played such an important part in the daily lives of the ancient Hebrews. All that was greasy possessed for the Jews a profound religious, social, and sensuous significance. Oil was used for anointing kings, priests, and sacred edifices. On festal days, men's cheeks and noses fairly shone with it. A matte-surfaced face was a sign of mourning. Then there were the animal fats. Fat meat was always a particular welcome sacrifice. Unlike the modern child, Jehovah revelled in mutton fat. His worshippers shared this taste. Eat ye that which is good, advises Isaiah, and let your soul delight itself in fatness. As for the prosperously wicked, they have more than their heart can wish. And the proof of it is that their eyes stand out with fatness. The world of the Old Testament, it is evident, was one where fats were scarce and correspondingly esteemed. One of our chief sources of edible fat, the pig, was taboo to the Israelites. Butter and lard depend on a supply of grass long enough for cows to get their tongues round. But the pastures of Palestine are thin, short, and precarious. Cows there had no milk to spare, and oxen were too valuable as draft animals to be used for suet. Only the sheep and the olive remained as sources of that physiologically necessary and therefore delicious fatness, in which the Hebrew soul took such delight. How intense that delight was is proved by the way in which the psalmist describes his religious experiences. Because thy loving kindness is better than life, my lips shall praise thee. My soul shall be satisfied as with marrow and fatness, and my mouth shall praise thee with joyful lips. In this age of Danish bacon and unlimited margarine, it would never occur to a religious writer to liken the mystical ecstasy to a good guzzle at the Savoy. If he wanted to describe it in terms of a sensuous experience, he would probably choose a sexual metaphor. Square meals are now too common to be ranked as epoch-making treats. The olive of pears is, then, a symbol, and I love it for what it stands for. I love it also for what it is in itself, aesthetically, for what it is in relation to the Mediterranean landscape in which it beautifully plays its part. The English are Germans who have partially gone Latin. But for William the Conqueror and the Angevins, we should be just another nation of Teutons, speaking some uninteresting dialect of Dutch or Danish. The Normans gave us the English language, that beautifully compounded mixture of French and Saxon, and the English language moulded in the English mind. By Latin out of German, such is our pedigree. We are essentially mongrels. That is the whole point of us. To be mongrels is our mission. If we would fulfill this mission adequately, we must take pains to cultivate our mongrellism. Our Saxon and Celtic flesh requires to be constantly re-wedded to the Latin spirit. For the most part, the English have always realized this truth and acted upon it. From the time of Chaucer onwards, almost all our writers have turned, by a kind of infallible instinct, like swallows, toward the south, toward the phantoms of Greece and Rome, towards the living realities of France and Italy. On the rare occasions when, losing their orientation, they have turned eastward and northward, the results have been deplorable. The works of Carlyle are there, an awful warning, to remind us of what happens when the English forget that their duty is to be mongrels and go whoring, within the bounds of consanguinity, after German gods. The olive tree is an emblem of the Latinity towards which our migrants' instinct commands us perpetually to turn, as well as for peace and for joy. It stands for all that makes us specifically English rather than Teutonic, for those Mediterranean influences without which Chaucer and Shakespeare could never have become what they learned from France and Italy, from Rome and Greece, to be the most essentially native of our poets. The olive tree is, so to speak, the complement of the oak, and the bright, hard-edged landscapes in which it figures are the necessary correctives of those gauzy and indeterminate loveliness of the English scene. Under a polished sky, the olives state their aesthetic case without the qualifications of mist, of shifting lights, of atmospheric perspective, which give to English landscapes their subtle and melancholy beauty. A perfect beauty in its way, but, as of all good things, one can have too much of it. The British Constitution is a most admirable invention, but it is good to come back occasionally to fixed first principles and the firm outline of syllogistic argument. With clarity and definition is associated a certain physical spareness. Most of the great deciduous trees of England give one the impression, at any rate in summer, of being rather obese. In Scandinavian mythology, Embla, the elm, was the first woman. Those who have lived much with old elm trees, and I spent a good part of my boyhood under their ponderous shade, will agree that the Scandinavians were men of insight. There is, in effect, something blousily female about those vast trees that brood with all their bulging masses of foliage above the meadows of the home counties. In winter they are giant skeletons, and for a moment in the early spring a cloud of transparent emerald vapour floats in the air. But by June they have settled down to an enormous middle age. By comparison, the olive tree seems an athlete in training. It sits lightly on the earth, and its foliage is never completely opaque. There is always air between the thin grey and silver leaves of the olive, always the flash of light within its shadows. By the end of summer, the foliage of our northern trees is a great clot of dark, unmitigated green. In the olive, the lump is always leavened. The landscape of the equator is, as the traveller discovers to his no small surprise, singularly like the landscape of the more luxuriant parts of southern England. He finds the same thick woods, and where man has cleared them, the same park-like expanses of luscious greenery. The whole is illumined by the same cloudy sky, alternately bright and dark, and wetted by precisely those showers of hot water which render yet more oppressive the sultriness of July days in the Thames Valley or in Devonshire. The equator in England is England in summer, but raised, so to speak, to a higher power. Falmouth cubed equals Singapore. Oh, well. Between the equatorial and the temperate zone lies a belt of drought. Even Provence is half a desert. The equator is dank. The tropics and the subtropics are predominantly dry. The Sahara and Arabia. The wastes of India and Central Asia and North America are a girdle round the earth of sand and naked rock. The Mediterranean lies on the fringes of this desert belt, and the olive is its tree, the tree of a region of sunlit clarity, separating the damps of the equator from the damps of the north. It is the symbol of a classicism enclosed between two romanticisms. "And where?" Sir George Beaumont inquired of Constable. "Where do you put your brown tree?" The reply was disquieting. The eccentric fellow didn't put it anywhere. There are no brown trees in Constable's landscapes. Breaking the tradition of more than a century, he boldly insisted on painting his trees bright green. Sir George, who had brought up to think of English landscape in terms of raw sienna and ochre, was bewildered. So was Chantrey. His criticism of Constable's style took a practical form. When Hadley Castle was sent to the Academy, he took a pot of bitumen and glazed the whole foreground with a coat of rich brown. Constable had to spend several hours patiently scratching it off again. To paint a bright green tree and make a successful picture of it requires genius of no uncommon order. Nature is embarrassingly brilliant and variegated. Only the greatest colourists know how to deal with such a shining profusion. Doubtful of their powers, the more cautious preferred to transpose reality into another and simpler key, the key of brown, for example. The England of the 18th century painters is chronically autumnal. At all seasons of the year, the olive achieves that sober neutrality of tone which the deciduous trees of the north put on only in autumn and winter. Where do you put your grey tree? If you are painting in Provence or Tuscany, you put it everywhere. At every season of the year, the landscape is full of grey trees. The olive is essentially a painter's tree. It does not need to be transposed into another key, and it can be rendered completely in terms of pigment that are as old as the art of painting. Large expanses of the Mediterranean scene are by nature herself conceived and executed in the earth colours. Your grey tree and its background of bare bone-like hills, red-brown earth, and the all but black cypresses and pines are within the range of the most ascetic palette, being acidic. Duran can render Provence with half a dozen tubes of colour. How instructive to compare his olives with those of Renoir. White, black, terre verde. Durand's rendering of the grey tree is complete. But it is not the only complete rendering. Renoir was a man with a passion for bright, gay colours. To this passion he added an extraordinary virtuosity in combining them. It was not in his nature to be content with a black, white, and earth-green olive. His grey trees have shadows of cadmium green, and where they look towards the sun are suffused with a glow of pink. Now, no olive has ever shown a trace of any colour warmer than the faint ochre of withering leaves in summer dusts. Nevertheless, these pink trees, which in Renoir's paintings of Cagney recall, I don't think that's how you pronounce Cagney, but that's okay, recall the exuberant girls of his latest, rosiest manner, are somehow quite startlingly like the cold grey olives which they apparently misrepresent. The rendering, so different from Durand's, is equally complete and satisfying. If I could paint and had the necessary time, I should devote myself for a few years to making pictures only of olive trees. What a wealth of variations upon a single theme! Above Pietrasanta, for example, the first slopes of the Apuan Alps rise steeply from the plain in a series of terraces built up step after step by generations of patient cultivators. The rises of this great staircase are retaining walls of unmortared limestone, the treads of grass, and on every terrace grow the olives. They are ancient trees, their boles are gnarled, their branches strangely elbowed. Between the sharp, narrow leaves one sees the sky, and beneath them, in the thin, softly tempered light, there are sheep grazing. Far off, on a level with the eye, lies the sea. There is one picture, one series of pictures. But olives will grow on the plain as well as on the hillside. Between Seville and Cordoba, the rolling country is covered with what is almost a forest of olive trees. It is a woodland scene. Elsewhere they are planted more sparsely. I think, for example, of that plain at the foot of the Marais in Provence in spring, beside the road from Toulon and Fréjus. The ploughed earth is a rich pozzuoli red. Above it hang the olives, grey, with soft black shadows and their highest leaves flashing white against the sky. And between the olives, peach trees in blossom, burning bushes of shell-pink flame in violent and irreconcilable conflict with the red earth. A problem there for the most accomplished painter. In sunlight, Renoir saw a flash of madder breaking out of the grey foliage. Under a clouded sky with rain impending, the olives glitter with an equal but very different intensity. There is no warmth in them now. The leaves shine white, as though illumined from within by a kind of lunar radiance. The soft black of the shadows is deepened to the extreme of night. In every tree there is simultaneously moonlight and darkness. Under the approaching storm, the olives take on another kind of being. They become more conspicuous in the landscape, more significant. Of what? Significant of what? But to that question, when we ask it, nature always stubbornly refuses to return a clear reply. At the sight of those mysterious lunar trees, at once so dark and so brilliant beneath the clouds, we ask, as Zechariah asked of the angel, what are these two olive trees upon the right side of the candlestick and upon the left side thereof? What be these two olive branches which through the golden pipes empty the golden oil out of themselves? And he answered me and said, Knowest thou not what these be? And I said, No, my lord. Then said he, These are the two anointed ones that stand by the Lord of the whole earth. And that, I imagine, is about as explicit and comprehensible an answer as our Wordsworthian questionings are ever likely to receive. Provence is a painter's paradise, and its tree, the olive, the painter's own tree. But there are disquieting signs of change. During the last few years, there has been a steady destruction of olive orchards. Magnificent old trees are being cut, their wood sold for firing in the land they occupied, planted with vines. 50 years from now, it may be the olive tree will almost have disappeared from southern France, and Provence will wear another aspect. It may be, I repeat, it is not certain. Nothing is certain nowadays except change. Even the majestic stability of agriculture has been shaken by the progress of technology. 30 years ago, for example, the farmers of the Rhone Valley grew rich on silkworms. Then came the invention of viscose. The caterpillars tried to compete with the machines and failed. The female form is now swathed in wood pulp. And between Lyon and Avignon, the mulberry tree and its attendant worm are all but extinct. Vines were next planted. But North Africa was also planting vines. In a year of plenty, vin ordinaire fetches about a penny a quart. The vines have rooted up again, and today the prosperity of the Rhone Valley depends on peach trees. A few years from now, no doubt, the Germans will be making synthetic peaches out of sawdust or coal tar. And then what? The enemy of the olive tree is the peanut. Grows like a weed all over the tropics, and its seeds are 50% pure oil. The olive is slow growing, capricious in its yield, requires much pruning, and the fruit must be hand-picked. Peanut oil is half the price of olive oil. The Italians, who wish to keep their olive trees, have almost forbidden the use of peanut oil. The French, on the other hand, are the greatest importers of peanuts in Europe. Most of the oil they make is re-exported. But enough remains in France to imperil the olives of Provence. Will they go the way of the mulberry trees, or will some new invention come rushing up in the nick of time with a reprieve? It seems that, suitably treated, olive oil makes an excellent lubricant, capable of standing up to high temperatures. 30 years from now, mineral lubricants will be growing scarce. Along with the castor oil plant, the olive tree may come again triumphantly into its own. Perhaps, or perhaps not, the future of Provençal of the landscape is in the hands of the chemists. It is in their power to preserve it as it is, or to alter it out of all recognition. It would not be the first time in the course of its history that the landscape of Provence has changed its face. The Provence that we know, terraced vineyard and olive orchard alternating with pine woods and those deserts of limestone and prickly bushes, which are locally called garrigues, is profoundly unlike the Provence of Roman and medieval times. It was a land then of great forests. The hills were covered with a splendid growth of ilex trees and Aleppo pines. The surviving Forêt du Dôme allows us to guess what these woods, the last outposts towards the south of the forests of the temperate zone, were like. Today the garrigue, those end products of a long degeneration, have taken their place. The story of Provençal vegetation is a decline and fall that begins with the ilex wood and ends with the garrigue. The process of destruction is a familiar one. The trees were cut for firewood and shipbuilding. The glass industry ate its way from the plain into the mountains, carrying with it irreparable destruction. Meanwhile, the farmers and the shepherds were busy, cutting into the woods in search of more land for the plough, burning them in order to have more pasture for their beasts. The young trees sprouted again, only to be eaten by the sheep and goats. In the end, they gave up the struggle, and what had been forest turned at last to a blasted heath. The long process of degradation ends in the garrigue, And even this blasted heath is not quite the end. Beyond the true garrigue, with its cistus, its broom, its prickly dwarf oak, there lie a series of false garrigues, vegetably speaking, worse than the true. On purpose or by accident, someone sets fire to the scrub. In the following spring, the new shoots are eaten down to the ground. A coarse grass is all that manages to spring up. The shepherd is happy. His beasts can feed as they could not do on the garrigue. But sheep and goats are ravenous. The new pasture is soon overgrazed. The coarse grass is torn up by the roots and disappears, giving place to ferocious blue thistles and the poisonous asphodel. With the asphodel, the process is complete. Degradation can go no further. The asphodel is sheep-proof, and even, thanks to its deeply planted tubers, fireproof. And it allows very little else to grow in its neighbourhood. If protected long enough from fire and animals, the garrigue will gradually build itself up again into a forest, but a desert of asphodels obstinately remains itself. Efforts are now being made to re-afforest the blasted heaths of Provence. In an age of cigarette-smoking tourists, the task is difficult, and the interruptions by fire frequent and disheartening. One can hardly doubt, however, of the ultimate success of the undertaking. The chemists may spare the olive trees, and yet the face of Provence may still be changed. For the proper background to the olive trees is the thinly fledged limestone of the hills, pinkish and white and pale blue in the distance, like Cézanne's Mont Saint-Victoire. Reforested, these hills will be almost black, with ilex and pine. Half the painter's paradise will have gone. If the desert is brought back to life with the cutting of the olive trees, the other half will follow. So what's your paradise? Where are you in the world? I really think that this essay shows how connected trees are to race cultures, people, humans. And look what's happening in the world. I think it shows the place of trees in relation to globalism, which is what we're all essentially fighting against, right? Olive trees are British. So there's a solution for the moment, for the meantime. Olive trees. Let us go to. So, yeah, what I have to say there is, that is one solution in this moment of helplessness and powerlessness. What I mean is, we haven't quite taken to the streets yet. So what can we do before that? One thing we can do is plant an olive tree and get in touch with who we really are. Those of you in Europe that are being, quote unquote, invaded. Yeah. I'm going to be planting a bay tree. And back to the rich people who all have a olive tree. Well, for peace. I wonder if it's because super rich people upset so many people because of how they got their money. And that olive tree provides them protection, much like the olive trees provided my street in the worst neighborhood in Auckland City protection. A sense of peace. And as Freeman Fly says something along the lines of, get out in the garden and save the world. So let's have a look at my book of tree spells. It's not mine. It's by Cheralyn Darcey. It's just a book that I own physically. Let's have a look what it says about, well, creating your own tree spells. There's something in the olive tree and a pushback against globalism, especially in places that are connected to the true history of the olive tree culturally, right? So in France, Italy, Britain, around there. How to create your own tree spells. To use a tree in a spell, you should understand its energy, and to do this, you need to know its meaning and attributes. You can find these by exploring the properties it has, or look to resources such as aromatherapy, herbal medicine, guides, and botanical history resources that discuss the properties of plants. You may wish to create a bath, essence, tea, mandala, anything at all that will be in itself an action related to the energy of the spell. Items required for this should be aligned with your outcome. These are usually called correspondences. Expand your knowledge in areas that you do not have experience with by seeking out resources that specialize in the correspondence you wish to include, such as astrological, crystal, color, and so on. Following is a brief list of such correspondences to get you started. Color. You can use color in cloths to set your spell upon, in the tools that you use, candles, and in the flowers themselves, and in additional ingredients. Timings. These are the times that you put spells together and when they are cast. They add an energetic boost to your spells by bringing alignment to what you are doing in the space you are creating it. Moon phases. The waxing moon for new projects, beginnings, and growth. The full moon for empowerment, healing, and attainment. Waning, banishing, cleansing, letting go. New, divination, revelations. Day of the week. So on and so forth. How are we for time? Okay. For example, days of the week, time of the day, crystals, blah, blah, blah. And flower meanings. Of course, most trees have flowers, and you can also use floral references that will explore meanings and uses to develop your own spells. Flowers hold the same energy as the rest of the plant. The olive branch. In fact, they give a little additional boost to that energy as the plant is in the process of reproduction. Moving along. There we go. There we go. So I think the most powerful aspect of that is, how much of that is pretense? I don't know. But hey, a little ritual, olive tree, on a cloudy day in the south of England, a cup of tea, club sandwich, the British flag, perhaps just because people hate it so much. Well, that's something you can do. On a full moon for empowerment, which is, I think, about now. It's basically a full moon right now. So there you go. Olive trees and a way to work with an olive tree as a solution to what's going on in terms of globalism. And furthermore, we could look at who we are, where we're from, and what trees symbolize that past that we are connected with. And we could plant those trees and acknowledge them and work with them before SHTF. Before that, okay? Okay, keep that in mind. Do that stuff. But that bit in between where we are waiting or we don't know what to do, this is something we can do. Right, Oracle of the Trees. We've got a few minutes.
So my Oracle of the Trees deck. Again, not mine, just one I own, something I own, written by Francesca Romana Valente. We're just going to look at what they have to say about the olive tree. Page 81, let's go. The symbology. Oh, okay, now we're going to the upright meaning. So if one was to pull the olive tree card out of this deck when doing a reading, according to the author, it would mean this. Drawing the card of the olive tree announces the end of an unresolved conflict that has been festering for some time, or a needed clarification following a long period of misunderstanding with someone close. I've just got to step out and say, isn't it interesting that that's what it symbolizes based on everything we're talking about and what's happening in the world with the globalization, mass immigration invasions. And we're talking about the olive tree and getting in touch with our European roots. And here we are with the olive tree, which has sort of gone missing in the way that Aldous Huxley has described through globalization itself. That the olive tree symbolizes the end of an unresolved conflict that has been festering for some time. The card can also refer to the resolution of problems at work, especially concerning conflicts with colleagues or superiors. More generally, the card represents the closing of a time of anguish for the seeker, who finally will find serenity and tranquility. If the question is regarding matters of the heart, the card indicates a return of harmony and accord in the relationship, thanks to a renewed ability to communicate openly and honestly. The card can also indicate an important feminine figure in the seeker's life. This can be a mother, sister, or friend, or girlfriend or wife. The surrounding cards will provide information regarding the role of this person relative to the question posed. In general, we can expect there to be significant influence from this woman. If the question is about the character of a specific person, the card describes her as having a strong personality, determined, sure, rational, and dependable, perhaps not particularly inclined to get carried away emotionally, but prepared to commit. Drawing both the olive tree and the oak tree is particularly good omen for relationships, as it implies a strong and lasting union based on shared values and ideals. This fortunate combination also implies the possibility of a happy marriage. So there we go. The olive tree for freedom, for peace. So let's not leave it to the landscaped gardens of the rich and famous. Let's get some olive trees going in our lives for our peace and our protection and our success and happiness. All right. And that's the end of that. So if you want to support me, you can go on to thesecretkindergarten.com and have a look at some of the services I offer for very cheap, but you don't have to do that. You can just enjoy the show. And that's about it. So thank you so much for for listening, okay? And I thought that olive tree exploration was really cool, and it keeps making me think twice about trees. And we are planting trees in our garden, some native ones as well. Okay, and we'll see you at the next one. Bye!